Welcome back, fellow spy fans. As usual, I'm Dave, and I'm joined here with Todd for another episode of Spies Like Us podcast.
Hello.
This week we're talking about Season 1, Episode 6 of Turn, Washington Spies. If you joined us last week, then hopefully you're caught up with us. If not, maybe go back and take a listen, or if you don't mind the spoilers, just keep trucking along with us. But yeah, this is about during the Revolutionary War, General Washington introduced an entire spy ring known as the Culper Spy Ring, and that is what this show is about. And we're back talking about Episode 6. Todd, what's happened so far before we got here?
Oh, between Episode 1 and here, major things that have happened is Abe is a lot more proactive on the Continental side at this point. He's no longer just participating for purely selfish reasons. He's actively trying to arrange trips to New York. New York, of course, being like the main British base in the U.S. At this time. And so a really difficult place to get information out of, but also very high value information could be procured from New York. He still does waffle like here and there. Abe is our character of conflicted conscience for the show. And he's still kind of in that spot, but also he's moving along toward being really anti-British and getting more proactive along that thing. Ben has returned to the main army, which due to increasing conflicts between him and his superior officer that were kind of hinted at even in the first episode, I believe. Those have kind of gotten worse and worse, and he's maybe expecting to be court-martialed. He was in a real previous episode too. We had the famous Delaware Crossing, which I think is worth mentioning just as a piece of showcraft. I like slow clapped and even just watching alone when I realized what it was that I was seeing, and such a genius choice to not show Washington crossing the Delaware, because that is the story, I don't want to say fable. What do you say? The myth. The myth of George Washington is he crossed the Delaware at Christmas time, and that it was a big surprise. I don't know the difference between fact and myth here, or fact and legend. So it also could have been a reason to kind of not exactly show him doing it, because maybe the way he actually did it doesn't match, the kind of legend that we're shown in.
I kind of felt like it was already. I kind of felt like it was already implied. Like everybody knows the famous painting and the big story of Washington taking the soldiers across the Delaware, but that we already knew that, and that his first time on screen was going to be a big deal. But this story isn't about the Revolution or Washington; it's about the spy ring, right? So that's kind of how I read that. I thought it was more of an artistic choice, but maybe there's some factual contradictions.
No, but exactly, but a really good artistic choice, I think. To Absolutely. Have it just kind of happen and just let the audience, just the realization dawning over you is like, oh, this is that night.
Yeah,
fucking cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool little Easter eggs, or I guess you'd call them Easter eggs, but little hints at, like, if you know anything about the Revolution, you're like, oh, this is then, and this is that point, and this is that time. That they throw in the little background, so you understand where we are history-wise, but we're watching the story of the spy ring.
I actually had a note of it was one of my very first notes. I hadn't brought it up, and it actually changes over the course of the season, but at least in the early episodes, I noticed they don't show dates when they cut to an establishing shot. they'll show the nice script that shows like what city or what part of the country we're looking at. And I thought leaving the dates out was kind of nice because I kind of, let's see, if you put the dates in, then it feels more like you're in a history lesson. And I really enjoy, like, something about not having the dates makes me feel more like I don't actually know how this war ends.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because
That's kind of
that's how you want to feel as an audience, and that's a terribly hard trick to pull off with these events. But again, just by showing like what some of these famous events would have looked like to a man on the street, that was only like peripherally connected, it really makes you feel like you're living in this history as opposed to like being taught it.
right.
Um,
um,
Ben and Caleb, uh, uh, again, Ben's superior officer didn't like his methods. He had gotten Abe's good information that he'd kind of accidentally got was about some Hessian movement into Trenton, which is for some reason super important. They don't give us the big strategic board game view of the war, which goes to my, the point I just made about making it feel more like you're living in it. But yeah, that got tossed in the fire, and they came up with this idea of just like faking a report and just kind of hiding it in the report that was being filed to Washington, in the assumption, or I guess just knowing that, all the stuff on the first 2 pages were so boring that the guy would just pass it on without reading it.
right.
And despite an alarming shot of the info of that letter being put on a stack of letters in a sea of stacks of letters, which is supposed to make us feel like, oh no, he's not going to get the information. We'll later find out he did in fact read it. He really needs to assign some officers to sort his mail. I think, yeah, that shot was definitely for dramatic effect. I hope that's not what his desk actually looked like.
I'm sure every general's desk looks like that. It's just shit everywhere. Anytime I've ever seen anybody in charge of a group of people, they always have just shit everywhere. Just because, like, everybody needs them and is only thinking about what they need. And so the person's just overwhelmed with, like, paperwork and stuff. So I think that's kind of funny. Yeah. And it makes them look busy, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Over on Red Team, General John Andre has launched a very elaborate plot to cement his control over his continental informant. We heard about this guy in episode 1. Now we've gotten to see him. This is not something that happens in episode 6, so I don't know how much time I want to spend on it, but it is another really rare instance of I'm scratching my head a little over what let's see, how do I put this? I see what he's doing, and I know what he wants to accomplish. I don't see how they connect exactly. The part I'm talking about? Tell me what you remember about it. This is with the actress that he recruits.
I haven't seen this season in a while, so I don't remember him recruiting I just remember he recruited a actress, and there was like a cat fight between the chick that Andre really loves and the actress.
Okay, well, what he does with the actress is he gets her to. Okay, now his informant they've never met face to face, so. The informant knows that he gave the information to John Andre, but he doesn't know what John Andre looks like. So Andre recruits, and seems to be actually consider his legit girlfriend, this actress, to seduce the continental guy who is another general, it turns out. And then while they're doing some kind of foreplay stuff, Andre and some soldiers just like burst in and say, you're fucked now. We gotcha. They take the girl out, and she, we're supposed to believe she's being molested or tortured or something. She's screaming bloody hell in the opposite room. But it's one of those things where it's all just for show. In fact, there's a really funny shot of in the other room, she's actually playing cards with the other soldiers while she's screaming. You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. So Andre's putting the screws to this guy saying, no, you're not a continental general. You're a British defector, which doesn't seem to be the case. And, says, you're going to give me information. The guy says, I already gave information. Andre says, to who? The guy says, I gave it to General John Andre. And that's when John Andre reveals that that's me. Pleased to meet you. All this stuff, like, it doesn't connect. Like, obviously he's trying to develop the source. He'd had, the most recent thing he got from this guy was information about the safe house. And when they went to attack the safe house, the Continentals clearly knew about it. And that's how Simcoe got ambushed. And it was a real, like, bloody nose for the Brits. And so now Andre can't be sure that he can trust this guy. I don't see how any of what we see him doing confirms that he can trust the guy. It's not a thing where he's vetting him like Caleb and, it's not a situation where he's like putting the guy to the test to see if he'll say the name John Andre. And if he doesn't, then he passes the test because he does say the name John Andre. So that wasn't the point of it. Just a little muddied. And it's like one of the very few things I've seen in the season that, really scratched a little hole. I ended up scratching a little hole in my head over trying to figure out how this stuff connects. But the easiest thing to me to have done, which is a missed opportunity, is just play the typical thing of, now that your source has given up some information, you now have that over them, and you can develop them further and force them into more dangerous and treasonous acts, right?
Yeah.
That would have been simple. But so anyways, but that's going on. And meantime, Anna's old housemaid Abigail has been shipped to New York and put as a housemaid into General Andre's household, which is a total coincidence and not something that was planned by anyone. And that's just kind of catching up where, like, what has happened to our main characters that might apply to what's going on in this episode. And I'll let you run with the beginning of this episode if you like.
Yeah, we actually got like an explosion of tradecraft, or at least the discussion thereof, which I really enjoyed. A lot of stuff's happened since episode one that sets us up for later, but there's really one main story that I think gets most of the attention this episode. And you brought up Talmadge and his like captain not really getting along and their ideology of how to handle intelligence. And I guess it's mentioned in this episode that captain is actually the head of intelligence, and his whole, I guess,
he's a general. He's a general, by the way.
Oh, he's a general. His whole approach is just the tried and true, use scouts and stuff like we discussed in episode one. But this episode, we start out with like a hanging of someone that was like robbing shit, and it was like an execution in front of the eyes of Talmadge and his superior general. And then there's like you mentioned, Talmadge thought he was going to be court-martialed, but it turns out it's more of like a gentlemanly discussion between Washington and this new really quirky character. I forget his name. I should have written down his name. But the actor played Milton in Office Space.
It's Stephen Root.
Yeah,
the
Stephen
actor.
Root.
I don't know. I didn't catch the character's name either.
Yeah, but he's a civilian that's been teaching encryptions and handling all kinds of spy master stuff for General Washington. And then we got this other general who's supposedly head of intelligence, and then Talmadge. So we've got like a discussion between these four men, and that's kind of like the meat of the episode is arguing over whether or not we should use civilians and have a chain of this kind of spy network that's intriguing Washington. That's kind of being promoted by Talmadge and this other guy played by Steve Root. And then the general is like, no, this should be handled in military fashion. And we shouldn't be using money for this when we need money, supplies, and stuff for our soldiers on the field and stuff. But like through this kind of conversation between these four men, we just get like a huge discussion of intelligence on a very like fundamental level, which I thought was kind of cool. The episode starts out with I guess Abraham like drops like a coated egg, and then we find out later how the spy master guy does it. Was that like in his head, by the way? Because it seems like he didn't get in trouble from that shot, and then he just ends up delivering
Oh,
food.
let me walk. You're talking about the cold open, and
Yeah.
yeah, it slipped past me on the first try, but let me explain what happens. In the cold open, we first see Stephen Root like just kind of from the side. We see that some man with glasses is writing something, and then we see in New York, Abraham's doing something involving a secret message in a hard boiled egg, but he gets stopped by an officer who wants to buy an egg, and in the altercation, Abraham gets shot, like gut shot, like
Right.
like he's gonna die, kind
Yeah.
of shot. And then, but from there we go back to the office where the big guy with the glasses is writing, and he like crumples it up, throws it into a waste basket that's overflowing with crumpled up pieces of paper, and says, well, time to start again. So
Oh, so
what's
he's
happening?
brainstorming. That's really cool.
Exactly. That's that scene is just, yeah, introducing us to the mind of the Stephen Root character and how much
Right.
work and how much thought he puts into figuring out, and he works out, and he's thinking about all the possible things that can go wrong, and when he comes to a dead end, he just stops and scraps the plan entirely and starts again from scratch.
Oh wow, yeah, that's hard to catch. That was kind of confusing. Thanks for clearing that up.
Sure.
But yeah, no, he does. That's the type of character he seems. He's just kind of like a kooky, out there and he considers like all the scenarios. So I totally missed that. So thanks for clearing that one up.
I was
Um,
ultra thrilled to see Stephen Root in this show,
yeah,
as I'm actually pretty much ultra thrilled to see him anytime.
yeah,
Um, I accidentally, when I was making the notes of the cast for the show, I did notice that he's only in seasons 1 and 2, which makes me sad. But
yeah,
it's probably better to know that in advance than to become disappointed when he just disappears, or worse, gets
yeah,
killed or something.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just hope he's in the show a whole lot, because he's really enjoyable to watch, and he's a really good character.
Yeah, it's super fun. I feel the same way about the Stephen Root. Anytime I see him in anything, I'm like, yay. Um,
So yeah, if I could go back and just kind of frame this episode a little, I mean, you definitely mentioned like what, the kind of stuff that we're gonna see, but like overall, it is like it's mostly a Ben episode. This is about Ben's journey, and we're gonna kind of like that story is pretty much about like starting with Washington being impressed with the New York info. He wants them to, he wants more. He wants more of this. And he's tasking these people to tell him, is there a way we can get more of this on a more reliable basis? They're going to have a lot of discussions about that. In the end, Talmadge is going to like win the argument with a really cool speech, which we'll save till after we've talked about some of the things that they discuss in tradecraft wise. Yeah.
yep.
The you mentioned the egg. I got bad news on this one. It's probably bullshit. Did the research, this technique has been described as early as the 3rd century and seems to have been mentioned by people, written about by people, as having been rediscovered numerous times since then. But the exact mix of what, the exact proportions of what you would need to mix to make this kind of ink that would, again, just in case someone's listening to this hasn't seen the show, with the technique we see is that you can basically write on the outer shell of a hard-boiled egg, and it's like invisible ink. But once you've cracked the egg and are looking at the albumen, by the way, that's the name for the white of an egg, you can see what's written there, which is really awesome. And I was super disappointed. Nobody that I can find on the internet has managed to replicate it. Lots of people have tried. It's probably bullshit, but we can't know for 100% sure. What about you? Have you got some other things you want to, you said there's a lot of tradecraft in here. You want to throw out some examples, some of our cool stuff. Most of this stuff comes from the Stephen Root character. In fact, almost all of it does, I think.
Yeah, so the episode mainly focuses on the discussion between these 4 men and the questions asked, whether or not they should go forward with setting up the ring, or what this kind of other general, I guess I'll just call him like General Prick, because that's just kind of like the cartoon character he fits. So we talked about the egg, and but Talmage kind of brings up his strategy that he's been using with Woodhull, and the idea is that he's got this chain, and we discussed this in episode 1, that anytime Abe has information, he tells Anna to do the signal, and the signal is tying up a black petticoat, and I think some other like linens to determine which cove to land in, which then signals Caleb to come in to meet with Abe. Abe gives the information gets from Caleb to Ben. Here we actually, because on the show we talk a lot about dead drops. Here we, and I described Stephen Root's character as this really quirky type of energetic oddball, and he starts like autistically flipping out. He was like, "What? Your contacts are meeting? No, your courier and your messenger should never meet. Blah blah blah." And then there's like kind of like a cool little scene with like Talmage and Stephen Root, where he's like, Root's explaining like, like the dangers of that, and he's like, "No, what you set up is like a predetermined place, and to leave the information." And the courier comes and picks it up. And why is that? And then he actually like calls it a dead drop, which was kind of fun. But he like, it kind of points out like the idea, even though they're using a cutout, which is like the purpose of having a cutout, separating the people. So I guess in this case it'd be Caleb is the separation between Talmage and Abe, but the idea of the courier and the messenger meeting could get them in trouble. So why don't we set up a dead drop, and that solves the problem. They're never ever seen together. The information is deposited and picked up, and there's no connection between them. I thought that was a fun scene, especially like Todd, you discussed like how much you liked Stephen Root. It's just like these are the type of characters he really shines in. Is when he just like gets all like ah.
Yeah, for sure. I strongly question whether or not the exact term "dead drop" had been coined at this point, but
Right.
I don't have any idea. I just have doubts. Not that it bugs me that they call it that in this show.
Yeah.
What else has he got for us?
One of the things he did praise Talmage for that I guess he hadn't thought of, which I was a little confused of, because I would think this idea would be older than time. You know what I mean? But apparently Stephen Root's character had never considered finding someone that already has the occupation of a good cover. Like he was talking about, he's used teachers and soldiers and artists and all these other people, and he was just like, "But your boy Abe is already a businessman. There's no reason to spend the money or time building this, I guess identity when he's already a guy." And I I'm sure this is not a new idea in the revolution, but I mean, maybe this is for the audience to explain like why this is a big deal. But I thought it was kind of cool that they actually like had a little exposition about this, because we don't really see this stuff kind of explained in most spy films. Like, if you're a spy fan, you kind of already understand the weight of this, but it was still kind of fun to hear them explain it. You know, and like I get what Stephen Root had mentioned, that he just like hired people and then like produced an identity for them.
Yeah, and he makes this great point too, and this is in counterpoint to General Stupid Chief's
Yeah.
General Stick in the Muds. Really wants to rely on soldiers that obey the chain of command, soldiers that like everything's very regimented and proven loyalties and strictly following orders. And Stephen Root says, no, soldiers, they make the worst spies, because they're so drilled in their movements and so disciplined, to their core, that you can just spot them a mile away, and they can't fake this kind of stuff. As far as Stephen Root having not thought of the idea of just recruiting people that are like already in place, my thought on that is kind of that I think, spying is an art, has got to be an art as old as cities,
Yeah.
I mean, and just the simple idea of scouting the enemy, like that's got to be, just ridiculously old. So I think where I land on some of this tradecraft stuff is that, I mean, I feel like probably at different points in history, people had to like kind of rediscover spycraft, because I don't think it was like there's no classes in it. I don't think
Right.
I don't think at this point in history, like anyone's been writing books about it and
Right.
how to do it. So, the people that might have learned this or that trick in one era likely didn't pass it down to later generations. So that's what I like to think is going on with stuff like that.
That they're just kind of figuring it out on their own, but these tricks might have been in use elsewhere, type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think Talmage's ideas that, like the historical Talmage, I think his ideas were largely like self-generated. Like these were ideas he had on his own, even though they're ideas like someone else in the past probably already kind of figured out. And,
Right.
Stephen Root's character has already learned like a different version of it, like, and is in many ways more advanced at it. But yeah, it's a case of more minds coming up with the best ideas, I think.
Right.
Root.
Speaking of skipping
Yeah.
the military chain of command, because you just brought it up, I don't know if I want to call this deep state propaganda or not, but I thought it was clever that they brought this up this early on in the season. But I'm not sure. It was so kind of like just snuck in, But the general, like, I hate everything unless it's what I do, is complaining that Congress will never approve the budget for this, and Stephen Root's like, "Oh, we won't have to. We'll have our own secret funds." This already, like, the show's implying that there was already like a slush fund in play long ago, pre birth of America, which isn't hard to believe, but it was just so like I really enjoyed watching it, and like the kind of quips between him and the general. But also I'm like, I'm not sure, like, is this kind of like a wink, to say, hey, we need this for national security and this is a reason why, or something, or that we have to skip like, balance of powers and like the democratic process, or something like that. Because that's kind of what this scene implies. Did you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really. But
Yeah.
I mean, as far as just appreciating the tradecraft as given to us as the audience and the show, this is another of Stephen Root's great points of things that we will need to do to make this work.
Oh yeah, that he's kind of covered all the bases. Not just like, oh hey, let's be tricky. Like, hey, how are we gonna fund this? How is this gonna work? How do we keep our agents safe? No, yeah, no, he's definitely really well rounded.
Right. And again, to the point of, different people having different blind spots, and what I said about Talmadge, probably, I think at least up to this point in the show, where he's I think he's going to go forward to become kind of a student of
Mhm.
Stephen Root's methodologies. But, another flip out for, opportunity for Stephen Root's character is to find out that they're not using any kind of encryption, that they're just writing out exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like, you went to Yale, right? Like, are you sure you went to Yale? Like, did you learn like Greek, Latin, and Hebrew? And yeah, and then well, didn't he also kind of like have a whole thing about agents' names? He was like, "Why are you calling him Woodhull? We need to give him a new
Hmm.
name or something." Yeah,
Yeah, the idea, just the simple idea of a code name,
yeah.
hadn't occurred to Talmadge. Um, and that's also going to become important. Oh, well, I guess there's one other thing. There's one other thing that happened in previous episodes leading up to this. That or no, this is in this episode. This is in this episode. But we also saw that Simcoe, who we remember having been captured by Talmadge in episode 1, has been returned as part of a prisoner exchange. And those prisoners are going to report to General Andre in New York so he can debrief them on anything they may have learned. One of the guys in the prisoner exchange is, along with Simcoe, is a plant that was put in there by Root.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to last too long because he apparently eats his meat that's just the way he eats his meat is like wrong. It's not the way they do it in Europe, and makes some other
Yeah,
mistakes.
you brought up Abigail, which was Anna's handmaiden. And there's a whole scene where Andre makes a whole fuss about the placement of silverware and dishes, and he asked her to show him how she was placed. And he pointed out, yeah, but in Europe, you're supposed to switch hands. It's what slows us down from falling into gluttony or something like that. And that was actually really cool that he was so paying attention to detail. And this goes back to the thing that Stephen Root's character was pointing out was that soldiers, like they can't forget like their strict rigid regimen, and so like this plant isn't from Europe. He's from the Americas and probably isn't going to know how to eat correctly like a European, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we got to
And
see a
also,
whole
like, he
scene
didn't
where
know.
Andre pointed that out.
He also like didn't know his regiment's motto or something, which was like
Yeah, or couldn't
really like
pronounce it correctly.
more damning, I
Yeah.
think. Um, but again, that goes to Root's blind spot about never having considered the idea of recruiting people. Like, he's, instead of trying to turn a redcoat, like a legit guy who would know his company's motto and would know naturally how to eat his meat in the European way, Root's idea was to put in someone to pretend to be that person. And that again goes to, Root has just never really considered the idea of just turning people that are already in place.
Uh-huh.
But
I
it's a nice
I like
try
the
on his
whole
part.
I like the whole battle between Andre and Simcoe, because Simcoe just being like a brutal like soldier that just stabs the guy in the middle of dinner. Here he is like, a guest at Andre's and just stabs a dude because he's like, this guy's obviously a traitor. Let me just kill him right here and now. And Andre just explodes at him. He's like, what have you done? And like Simcoe's like jacking himself off, like, oh yeah, like I knew he was like a traitor because he didn't know his motto and couldn't eat right. And he's like, yeah, I already fucking knew that. My plan was to flip him, which you've robbed me of. Like, were you so bloodthirsty that you could, like, has it been that long since you've killed that you couldn't just wait?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a clear like thematic distinction between spy and soldier going on in this episode, which I kind of liked, even though a lot of spies did come right out of military. So, but it's an interesting point about the kind of rigidity of over and over regimen versus the natural interaction between human beings, I guess, is I like the point being made, which I thought was kind of nice.
Agreed. So to get to the well, unless there's other things, I don't have anything else to talk about like kind of the discussions they have about tradecraft. I'm ready to talk about basically the way it plays out. And if you're ready to go there, if you didn't have any other specific tradecraft to talk about.
No, yeah, you're talking about the big speech, yeah, the what is that, pathos? That is really cool. The other thing I did want to mention was Stephen Root's like comment. What did you say? Only that which is concealed is protected,
Right.
And that I think is a good springboard into if you want to just start going into the big speech. That would be cool. I thought that was a powerful quote. I liked it.
Right. So to set this up right, we need to mention the end of episode 5. The end of episode 5, the big dum moment is when the big guy, George W., finally makes his appearance on the show. He shows up just at the very end of 5 and says, "Who is Abraham Woodhull?" And so we're like, oh, what the hell is going on? How does Washington know this name? Where is this going? What's going on here? And that's going to be very important to Washington's final decision, because at the beginning of their discussions, Talmadge asks Washington, how do you know that name? And Washington just replies, excellent question, and then turns away and markedly doesn't answer the question. Mm-hmm. So with that in place, do you want to handle like, Washington's final, ask of them, like, can we do this, and how Ben handles it?
Yeah, they apparently the general, Washington ordered the general and Talmadge to come back with a decision. And the general comes back, as he's been stuck in, scouts tried and true, military men, that's it, and Talmadge comes back, you watch the episode and you just expect Talmadge to just jump on Root and Washington's side. Like, no, we need like an actual spy ring type of thing. But he does it. He comes back and he like kind of protests the whole thing. He's like, well, the thing is if we're the keepers of secrets, there's going to be a requirement of a lot of trust. And it seems like there isn't any trust between the four of us. And, you could totally see kind of the foreshadowing of like, the balance of power type of concept of, the United States of America kind of just fitting into this. And he goes, well, the general here doesn't trust my use of civilians. Root doesn't trust my experience. You don't trust, General Washington. You don't trust, General Stick in the Mud with his military mind. And on top of that, including you, Your Excellency, you mentioned my friend's name, Abraham Woodhull, and have yet to disclose how you came about that name. And that shows that you don't even trust me when I have people, like, it's basically implied I'm risking people's lives, and these are my friends. on top of that, and what are we even doing here? And that really like pulls on like Washington's heartstrings, right? You know, very very like, yeah, you're right. We, if we're gonna have this, we're gonna need some sort of set of standards, and as well as develop some kind of trust between us, which I thought was nice, little sentimental, heartfelt moment.
Yeah, and as a QA professional, and someone that I mean, in quality assurance was my career for many years, and the main job is to absolutely be honest with the guys upstairs about when they ask like what's the state of affairs. Like you can't massage it. You can't massage the truth. So I love the fact that Ben, even though this is his dream project, you know,
Yeah,
but he's willing to sink it by the fact that, just the facts within this room are just not adding up to what we actually need. And I think this is like just crazy good script writing. So Washington asks, he wants to consult with Talmadge privately, takes him outside, and basically tells him, I just figured it out. Like, nobody told me the name Abraham Woodhull. I forget. Do you remember exactly how it goes?
yeah,
Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
He
Go ahead.
So, well, first of all, we actually didn't discuss this in episode one, and I'm really upset we didn't, because so this is perfect timing. One, I wanted to point this out as like a EA plus spy points on Washington, because he used a little bit of analysis on this, um, getting fragmented information and then taking incomplete information and drawing a conclusion. So, little trivia tidbit, and I'm sure our huge spy fan listeners are aware of the name Nathaniel Hale, is actually the first American spy to die for his country. He was discovered by the Redcoats and hung, and I believe his final words were, "I wish I had many more lives so I could die that many more times for my country," or something like that. But there's actually a statue at Langley, and any agents that go out in the field will go and leave money for the statue of Nathaniel Hale as kind of like a little what would you call what's that called, superstition. Anyway, Nathaniel Hale, who apparently was buddies with this whole circle of buddies, or at least knew all these guys in Sawtucket, his piece of intelligence that he got over to Washington was the names Benjamin Talmadge, Caleb, was it Brewster? Caleb something, and then Abraham Woodhull, a farmer. Um, the note that Talmadge had fed into the reports to get to Washington, that they had to sneak in to get to him, um, mentioned a farmer, and that's when Washington himself took this piece of intelligence that he got from Nathaniel Hale, and then this fragmented piece of information that turned out to be verified, that there was a big attack and that all this stuff was going on, and it helped them win. And he put two and two together, and he was like, well, the farmer must be Abraham Woodhull, and Talmadge must be involved. So major spy points on Washington here. I don't know if this is
Yeah,
how it went down, but it was fun.
right. As far as how it all went down, it's a good time. I mean, yeah, Washington is demonstrating really great acuity in this scene, and he's also the actor's doing a really great job of like this guy does like exude the kind of charisma that makes it believable that people would risk so much
Mm.
to go under his command. We can't know, at least not with my limited studies into the subject, we can't know if Washington was really this cool, because we always have to remember, like, he is our first president, he is like our national hero, so we always have to be on guard for like myths to be intruding on reality, and for the show to maybe have an interest in massaging its primarily American audience, I assume,
Yeah.
into being so like, yeah, George Washington, he's fucking awesome.
Right.
Um, but I think the most I know of Washington is from this one documentary that I watched like a long time ago when I was a teenager, and I don't know if it was propaganda, but everything I've ever heard about him says that he was actually a very impressive and super intelligent man, and could drink anyone under the table. He legendarily legend
Yeah.
legendarily drink beer from morning till night, like in astonishing quantities. That
Right. I heard that 25% of his presidential salary went to beer. Is I believe what I had heard. I don't know how accurate that is, but I'd like to believe that that's the case.
um, yeah. So that's the thing, and Washington is so impressed. He's so impressed with the fact that Ben has put his finger on the absolute heart of the problem. It is a thing about trust, and Washington is willing to go that route, not because someone convinced him that this was a good idea, but because someone precisely told him exactly what it would take for this to work.
Hmm.
And so they're gonna do it. And the episode finishes with I guess you could call it a callback. Remember, Root has insisted if we're gonna do this, like, our agents have to have code names. They've settled on Culpepper
Uh-huh.
for Abraham, and I think that the episode ends with Benjamin asking, "Well, why Culpepper?" And Washington declines to answer the question with another excellent question and
Yeah.
doesn't answer.
Right.
So so they are going to. So this signals like, and this is why this is so just genius storytelling. Like, they are going to proceed, but Washington's acknowledging to Ben, like, yeah, we are gonna have secrets from each other,
Yeah.
but we're gonna trust that it's gonna pay out.
We need some trust, and but we also need to understand that there's going to be secrets that we got to protect. Yeah.
Need to know,
I like.
motherfucker.
Yeah, you're on a need to know basis. Prove yourself first, and then yeah. Oh, and that's right. He got promoted to major because I think the general's protest was like a captain can't be head of intelligence, and then Washington's like, that's why I promoted him to major. And it's
Yeah,
like, oh, yeah,
and so yep. So Washington has a new head of intelligence, and it's our boy Ben.
yep. Um, Anything else you wanted to point out? Or I think this is a good place to finish and maybe lead on for the next episode.
Yeah, we had it. Yeah, this is definitely a Ben's journey episode, for
Yeah.
sure, and a really good one. And Simcoe's back on the board, so it's following my, like I've said, like my suspicion is the episode right after the first episode after the midpoint of a season. That's the one where they're gonna really start setting stuff up, and I feel justified that this episode confirms my theories so far.
Yeah, definitely a good choice. Uh, Absolutely, like enjoyed watching this and letting it play out. But next week we're finishing season one, and I think it's episode 10.
Yep, it's a 10 episode series.
And then after that, Where Eagles Dare, I believe, is our next film.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so join us next week for episode 10. And if you want to jump ahead, definitely get a watch of Where Eagles Dare when you get a chance, because that'll be our next movie. And if you
Do
haven't
try
already. Go ahead.
if you care about spoilers, do try to make sure you finish the season. I don't think there's a whole lot to spoil about this show, to be honest.
America wins.
do try to jump ahead and catch up with us, because our habit when we do the final episode of a season, which is really just also an excuse for us to talk about the season in general, will be, there will be no holdback on the spoilers on that. Another note too for people watching out there, I threw this in the group, but maybe you're not in the group. This show, Netflix has started doing something which I appreciate, that when a show is going to disappear from their roster, they start telling you that. So if you're just watching this on Netflix, which I think I still assume is where most people get their streaming content. I think it's still the number one out there. Yeah, this show's going to disappear from Netflix on December 1st, just 3 weeks from now, or 2 weeks from now by the time you're hearing this. So catch as much of it as you can. It is an AMC original, and if you go to the AMC Plus page, you'll see that they have the show all set up, and all the episodes are there, but each of them says not available. My assumption is that the moment it disappears from Netflix, it's natural to assume that it's going to show up on AMC Plus. And if you don't have that, it's a $4.99 a month subscription, which to continue and finish this show, for me, absolutely worth the money. I plan on throwing them that cheddar.
Hell yeah. Yeah, if you haven't already, subscribe to our podcast, Spies Like Us podcast. You can search on any podcast app that you use. Also, shoot us a line if you love us, if you hate us. SpiesLikeUs.net. Go to the contact page. You can shoot us an email. Or you can just tweet us, Spies_like_us, or Facebook.com/SpiesLikeUsPodcast. And tell your friends about us. Right, Todd?
Oh, yeah. As always, if you like this show, chances are you know someone else that might, or maybe just tell some random person sitting on that park bench next to you.
Hell yeah.
And hope that they're not working for the other side.
Right. All right. Well, see everyone next week.
Sounds good.
The preceding transmission sampled the song Enter the Party by Kevin MacLeod, and sound effects from freesound.org. Attributions and links are found at spieslikeus.net.